The rain started just before sunset. Sarah Blake barely noticed at first. She was finishing a 12-hour shift at Mercy General Hospital, signing discharge papers while trying to ignore the ache in her shoulders. The emergency room had been relentless all day. Broken wrists, chest pains, a construction accident, a teenager with a concussion. The usual chaos. What she wanted now was simple. Go home, make dinner, help Emma finish her homework, pretend life was normal. Her phone vibrated. Rachel. Sarah smiled automatically and answered. Hey. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then she heard breathing. Fast, uneven, terrified. Rachel. A sob answered her. Sarah straightened instantly. Every instinct she had as a nurse fired at once. Rachel, what's wrong? I need help. The words came out broken, like they hurt. Where are you? Rachel hesitated, then whispered an answer. Highway 47. Sarah's stomach dropped. Rachel never drove that road unless something was seriously wrong. Tell me what's happening. Another pause. Then the truth finally came. David found me. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course he had. 3 months earlier, Rachel had finally escaped her husband. 2 years of emotional abuse. 2 years of fear. 2 years of pretending bruises happened by accident. Rachel had changed her phone number, moved apartments, obtained a restraining order, done everything right. Apparently none of it mattered. He followed me from work, Rachel whispered. He's behind me right now. Fear spread through Sarah's chest like ice water. Call 911. I can't. Why? He said if I called anyone he'd kill me. Sarah gripped the steering wheel. The rain hammered her windshield. Listen to me. Keep driving. Stay on the phone. Rachel started crying. I don't think I can do this anymore. Yes, you can. No, Sarah. I'm tired. Don't you dare. Rachel laughed weakly through tears. You always were the strong one. Sarah almost snapped. Because that wasn't true. Rachel had always been the brave one. The older sister. The protector. When kids bullied Sarah in school, Rachel handled it. When their father died unexpectedly, Rachel carried the family. When life got ugly, Rachel stood in front of it. But now she sounded broken. Completely broken. And Sarah hated it. I'm coming. No. I'm already driving. You have Emma. I'll figure it out. Sarah. What? If something happens. Nothing is happening. If something happens, tell Emma I love her. Sarah slammed her hand against the steering wheel. Stop talking like that. But the line suddenly went silent. Rachel. Nothing. Rachel. The call disconnected. Sarah stared at her phone, then pressed harder on the accelerator. The storm got worse. She didn't care. All she could think about was reaching her sister before it was too late. Rachel's car sat crooked on the shoulder of Highway 47. Its hazard lights flashed through the rain. Sarah nearly drove into the ditch when she saw it. She slammed the brakes, jumped out, and ran. Rachel. Wind howled across the highway. No answer. Her heart pounded harder. The driver's door stood open. The interior was empty. 1,000 horrible possibilities raced through her mind. Then headlights appeared. Not one vehicle. Several. Motorcycles. Big ones. Sarah froze. The motorcycles rolled through the storm and stopped around Rachel's abandoned car. Leather jackets. Heavy boots. Harsh faces. The kind of men most people crossed the street to avoid. Bikers. One rider removed his helmet. Gray eyes. Dark beard. A weathered face carrying years of scars. He studied Sarah, then looked toward Rachel's car. You Sarah Blake? Her pulse jumped. How do you know my name? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped off the motorcycle. Rain dripped from his jacket. Then his eyes moved to Sarah's shoulder, specifically to the place hidden beneath her shirt. The tattoo. The one she'd spent 13 years trying to forget. His expression changed. Recognition. Respect. Disbelief. Well, he said quietly. I'll be damned. Sarah's stomach tightened. Nobody was supposed to know about the tattoo. Nobody. Who are you? The biker extended a hand. Ryder Kane. The name meant nothing. Until he spoke again. My brother's name was Connor. Everything stopped. 13 years vanished. And suddenly she remembered. A younger version of herself. A rainy roadside. A motorcycle crash. A bleeding biker left for dead while hundreds of cars drove past. Everyone else kept driving. Sarah had stopped. Saved his life. Stayed with him until help arrived. And before the ambulance left, Connor had given her a strange tattoo. A symbol. A promise. A debt. He'd told her if she ever needed help, someone would answer. She thought it had been nonsense. A dramatic gesture from a dying man. Apparently she was wrong. You know Connor? She whispered. Ryder laughed softly. Know him? He pointed at himself. I'm his brother. Sarah couldn't believe it. 13 years. And somehow the past had returned. Where's Rachel? Ryder's expression hardened immediately. That's the problem. A younger biker approached. Tracks. Everyone turned. The biker pointed toward muddy ground beside the road. Boot prints. Several of them. Sarah felt sick. David. Ryder nodded. Looks that way. Another biker walked over carrying something. A phone. Rachel's phone. The screen was cracked. Rainwater dripped from it. Sarah's hands trembled. She's alive. Ryder said it with complete certainty. How do you know? Because if David wanted her dead, she wouldn't be missing. The logic made Sarah feel worse. Much worse. The biker looked toward the darkness beyond the highway. Then at the gathering storm. Then at Sarah. We'll find her. Sarah almost laughed. You don't even know her. Ryder's eyes never left hers. My brother never forgot what you did. The words hit harder than she expected. For 13 years, she'd buried that memory. Moved on. Built a life. Raised Emma. Worked endless hospital shifts. She never imagined a single act of kindness could survive that long. Yet here they were. A highway. A storm. And a group of bikers willing to ride into danger because of something she did more than a decade ago. One motorcycle engine roared. Then another. Ryder climbed back onto his bike. We're bringing her home. Sarah looked at the storm. At the darkness. At the uncertainty. And for the first time all night, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Rachel wasn't alone. Maybe none of them were. The diner sat 20 miles from the highway. Old neon sign. Faded booths. Bad coffee. Exactly the kind of place nobody noticed. Which made it perfect. Sarah sat with Emma in a corner booth while rain battered the windows. The bikers had insisted. If David was desperate enough to abduct Rachel, Sarah and Emma could be targets too. She hated the logic. But she couldn't argue with it. Emma stirred her hot chocolate. Mom. What? Are those bikers bad guys? Sarah looked across the diner. Half a dozen leather-clad men occupied tables near the entrance. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. One of them caught Emma looking and smiled kindly. Emma smiled back. Sarah shook her head. No. But they look scary. Sometimes good people do. Emma considered that. Then nodded. Satisfied. Sarah wished life were that simple. Her phone sat on the table. Silent. Every minute felt longer than the last. Every passing second tightened the knot in her stomach. Ryder and the others had been gone nearly an hour. No calls. No updates. Nothing. The diner clock ticked loudly. Too loudly. Then the door opened. Cold air rushed inside. A biker entered. Danny. One of Ryder's closest friends. His expression wasn't encouraging. Sarah stood immediately. What happened? Danny sat across from her. They found David. Her heart jumped. And Rachel. Danny hesitated. Sarah hated that hesitation. Tell me. She's alive. Relief hit first. Pure, overwhelming relief. Then came the rest. But Danny looked away. David's got her at an old farmhouse. The relief vanished. He threatened to kill her if anyone gets close. Sarah sat back down. Her hands shook. Emma slid closer, wrapping tiny arms around her mother's waist. A simple gesture. But somehow it kept Sarah together. Ryder's negotiating. Danny continued. He thinks he can talk David down. Sarah laughed bitterly. You don't know David. No. But Ryder knows men like him. The diner fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Minutes crawled by. Then Sarah's phone buzzed. Rachel. Sarah answered instantly. Rachel. The sound of crying filled the line. Not Sarah's. Not Emma's. Rachel's. I'm sorry. Rachel whispered. Sorry for what? For dragging everyone into this. Stop. I should have left years ago. Rachel. I thought he'd change. Sarah closed her eyes. The familiar tragedy. The same words she'd heard from dozens of abuse victims in the emergency room. Hope. Regret. Self-blame. I thought if I loved him enough. No. Sarah's voice became firm. This is not your fault. Silence. Then Rachel started crying harder. Before Sarah could speak again, another voice entered the call. Male. Cold. Dangerous. David. Family reunion? Sarah's blood froze. What do you want? David laughed. What I want is impossible. The sound sent chills through her. You know what's funny? No. I used to think Rachel would come back. Sarah didn't answer. I thought eventually she'd remember who she belonged to. Belonged. The word made her sick. Rachel wasn't property. She wasn't an object. Yet David still didn't understand. You lost that right. Sarah said quietly. The laughter disappeared instantly. Careful. Sarah didn't care anymore. She was tired of fear. Tired of running. Tired of watching good people suffer. You lost her the moment you started hurting her. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then David laughed again. But now it sounded different. Unstable. Dangerous. And Sarah realized something terrifying. He wasn't planning to walk away from this. Not peacefully. Not willingly. Not ever. The call disconnected. Sarah stared at the screen. Danny stared too. Neither needed to say it. They both understood. Tonight was heading towards something terrible. And somewhere out in the darkness, Ryder Kane was racing against time to stop it. The farmhouse sat alone in the middle of nowhere. Weather-beaten. Half-forgotten. Surrounded by dead fields and rusted fencing. The kind of place people passed without noticing. The kind of place a desperate man would choose. Ryder killed his motorcycle engine nearly a mile away. The sudden silence felt strange. Only rain remained. Rain and thunder. The four bikers moved carefully through darkness. No headlights. No flashlights. No unnecessary noise. Years of experience had taught them caution. Tonight caution might save lives. Jake crouched beside a muddy tire track. Fresh. Ryder nodded. David's truck. No doubt. The trail led directly toward the farmhouse. The building looked abandoned. Dark windows. Collapsed porch. Broken roof shingles. Exactly the kind of place law enforcement hated. Too many blind spots. Too many places to hide. Too many ways things could go wrong. Ryder studied the structure. One vehicle outside. David's pickup. No movement visible. No lights. No signs of Rachel. The quiet bothered him. Good situations rarely stayed this quiet. Positions. The bikers split instantly. Years of riding together created trust. Nobody questioned. Nobody hesitated. Everyone simply moved. Ryder approached from the front. Jake circled left. Marcus moved toward the rear. Tommy took high ground near an old equipment shed. For directions. For angles. For opportunities if things went bad. And Ryder fully expected things to go bad. The farmhouse door suddenly opened. Everyone froze. A figure stepped onto the porch. Rachel. Relief hit Ryder immediately. Alive. Standing. Uninjured. At least physically. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. Rachel's eyes searched the darkness. Then landed on him. Even from that distance he saw it. Fear. Not for herself. For someone else. She subtly shook her head. Once. Barely noticeable. A warning. Don't come closer. The realization arrived instantly. Trap. The farmhouse wasn't empty. David knew they were there. Ryder slowly raised both hands. Stepped from cover. Rain soaked his jacket. David. His voice echoed through darkness. We need to talk. A laugh emerged from inside the farmhouse. Cold. Mocking. Unstable. The same laugh Sarah heard over the phone. David appeared behind Rachel. Gun in hand. One arm around her shoulders. The barrel resting against her neck. Jake swore quietly from somewhere in darkness. The situation had just become much worse. Talk. David smiled. You bikers always think talking fixes everything. Ryder didn't react. Sometimes it does. No. David tightened his grip. Sometimes people deserve consequences. Rachel closed her eyes. Exhaustion covered her face. The kind of exhaustion that came from years of fear. Years of manipulation. Years of surviving. Ryder saw it immediately and understood something. David had been hurting her long before tonight. Tonight was simply the final chapter. You don't want this. Ryder kept his voice calm. Measured. Steady. David laughed again. That's where you're wrong. The gun shifted slightly. Rachel flinched. Every biker watching felt the same surge of anger. The same instinct. Rush him. End it. But instinct got people killed. Patience saved them. David pointed toward Ryder. You know what she did. Ryder remained silent. She embarrassed me. The biker almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was pathetic. This wasn't about love. Never had been. This was about control. And David couldn't tolerate losing it. Rachel isn't your property. The statement landed like a punch. David's face twisted instantly. There it is. There what is? The biker wisdom. David grinned. You think you're heroes. No. We save people. The grin disappeared. For the first time genuine rage appeared. And that terrified Ryder. Because angry people made mistakes. Desperate people made disasters. David was both. Then something unexpected happened. Rachel spoke. Quietly. But clearly. I'm done being afraid of you. David froze. Everyone froze. Even thunder seemed to pause. Rachel looked directly at him. No fear. No hesitation. Just exhaustion. I spent 2 years believing I deserved this. David stared. I spent 2 years thinking if I tried harder you'd change. The gun trembled slightly. And I was wrong. The words hit harder than any punch. Because they were true. David knew they were true. Everyone knew. Rachel straightened despite his grip. I don't belong to you. Silence. Complete silence. Then David's face changed, and Ryder immediately knew. This was the breaking point. The gun fired. Everything exploded. Movement. Shouting. Chaos. The sound echoed across empty farmland. Rachel screamed. Jake rushed forward. Marcus moved from behind the barn. Tommy emerged from cover, and Ryder sprinted toward the porch. For one terrifying second, nobody knew what happened. Not even Rachel. Then she realized something. She wasn't hit. The bullet missed. David's hand shook wildly. The shot had gone into the ceiling. The realization changed everything. Because now Rachel understood something. David wasn't in control anymore. He was unraveling. Ryder reached the porch first. David saw him, panicked, and made the worst decision possible. He tried dragging Rachel inside, using her as a shield, using her as protection, using her exactly the way he'd always used her, as something to hide behind. Rachel suddenly stopped resisting. The change surprised him. Then she drove her elbow backward, hard, directly into his ribs. David screamed. The gun lowered. Only for a second, but a second was enough. Ryder crashed into him like a freight train. Both men slammed through the farmhouse doorway. Furniture shattered. Wood splintered. The gun flew across the room. Rachel collapsed to the floor. Safe. Finally safe. But the fight wasn't over. David attacked wildly. Punches. Kicks. Pure desperation. Years of anger exploding at once. Ryder absorbed the first hit. Then the second. Then drove David backward into a wall. The farmhouse shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, thunder rolled across the fields. Jake rushed inside. Marcus followed. Tommy secured the weapon. Everyone moved with practiced precision. Everyone except David. Because David wasn't thinking anymore. Only reacting. Only fighting. Only losing. Then police sirens appeared. Distant at first. Growing louder. Blue lights flashed through rain-covered windows. David heard them, and something inside him broke completely. No. The words sounded almost childish. No, no, no. He looked around wildly, searching for escape, searching for control, searching for anything, finding nothing. Rachel stood slowly. Her legs trembled. Her hands shook. Yet somehow she remained standing. David saw her. And for one final moment, everything became quiet. The storm, the sirens, the shouting, all of it faded. Only Rachel remained. You ruined everything. The accusation sounded pathetic now. Weak. Small. Rachel looked at him sadly. No. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You did. The truth destroyed him more effectively than any arrest ever could. Sheriff deputies entered moments later. Weapons drawn. Orders shouted. Handcuffs clicked. And finally, the nightmare ended. Not dramatically. Not heroically. Simply ended. Because sometimes evil doesn't fall with a grand speech. Sometimes it collapses beneath its own weight. David was led away into the rain. Alone. Exactly as Rachel had once been. The diner remained awake long after midnight. Sarah hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Neither had Emma. Every passing minute felt heavier. Every unanswered phone call felt worse. The uncertainty was unbearable. Then the door opened. Danny's phone rang. He answered immediately. Listened. Said nothing. Then slowly smiled. Sarah noticed instantly. What? Danny looked up. Relief filled his eyes. She's alive. Sarah couldn't breathe. What? Rachel's alive. The room disappeared. The fear disappeared. The exhaustion disappeared. Only relief remained. Tears arrived before she realized she was crying. Emma started crying too. Not from sadness. Relief. Pure overwhelming relief. Sarah collapsed back into the booth, covering her face, laughing and crying simultaneously. The emotional release felt impossible to control. They're bringing her here. Danny sat beside them. She wants to see you first. Sarah nodded repeatedly, unable to form words, unable to think, unable to do anything except wait. This time the waiting felt different. This time hope existed. 20 minutes later, motorcycle headlights appeared outside. 6 bikes, then 7, then more. The roar of engines filled the parking lot. The diner door opened, and Rachel walked inside. Sarah ran. No hesitation. No thought. Just movement. The sisters collided halfway across the room, holding each other, sobbing, laughing, refusing to let go. Months of fear. Years of worry. Everything poured out at once. Rachel looked exhausted, bruised, emotionally shattered, but alive. Alive. And that was enough. More than enough. Emma wrapped herself around both women. The three remained there for several minutes. Nobody interrupted. Nobody spoke. Even the bikers looked away respectfully. Some moments belonged only to family. This was one of them. Eventually, Rachel looked toward Ryder. The biker stood quietly near the entrance, blood on his knuckles, rain still dripping from his jacket. He looked uncomfortable receiving attention. Sarah walked toward him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she hugged him. The biker froze, completely caught off guard, then awkwardly returned the gesture. You brought her back. Sarah's voice broke. You promised. Ryder smiled softly. Told you we would. The diner felt warmer afterward. Safer. Lighter. Conversations slowly returned. Coffee appeared. Food arrived. Life resumed. Not normal life. Not yet. Healing would take time. A lot of time. But for the first time in months, Rachel wasn't looking over her shoulder. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. As dawn approached, Emma fell asleep across two diner chairs. Rachel rested quietly beside Sarah. The storm finally ended. Sunlight appeared beyond distant hills, and Ryder stood outside watching the sunrise. A familiar weight rested on his shoulders. The weight of promises kept. The weight of debts repaid. The weight of knowing one act of kindness 13 years earlier had come full circle. Inside the diner, Sarah looked through the window. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Some things didn't require words. Some things were understood. And as the first sunlight touched the horizon, both realized the same thing. The story that began 13 years ago on a rainy roadside wasn't over. It was only beginning. The story should have ended after David's arrest. At least that was what Sarah thought. Rachel was safe. The police had evidence. The nightmare was over. But real life rarely ends neatly, especially when scars remain long after danger disappears. 3 weeks later, Rachel still woke up screaming. Some nights, she barely slept. Other nights, she slept too much. The silence left behind by fear often became its own kind of prison. Sarah understood that. As a nurse, she'd seen it hundreds of times. People survived the accident, the assault, the illness, the trauma, then spent years surviving the memory. The sisters sat together on Sarah's back porch one cool evening. Emma chased fireflies in the yard. The sky glowed orange above distant hills. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Rachel finally broke the silence. I don't know who I am anymore. Sarah looked at her. What do you mean? Rachel laughed softly. A sad laugh. The last few years were all about surviving David. She stared at her coffee. Now he's gone. That's a good thing. I know. Rachel nodded. But I spent so much time being afraid of him that I forgot how to be myself. The words hit harder than Sarah expected, because they were honest. Painfully honest. The following Saturday, Ryder stopped by the house. Not alone. 5 motorcycles rolled into the driveway. Emma spotted them first. She practically launched herself across the lawn. The bikers adored her, especially because Emma treated them like normal people. Not dangerous bikers. Not intimidating men. Just friends. Ryder carried a cardboard box. Sarah frowned. What is that? The biker smiled. Community project. That answer explained absolutely nothing. The box turned out to contain painting supplies, brushes, rollers, drop cloths, cleaning materials. Rachel stared at the collection, confused. What are those for? Jake grinned. Your apartment. The sisters exchanged glances. Neither understood. Then Ryder explained. Several bikers had visited Rachel's apartment building. Not because they were asked, because they wanted to help. The building owner had agreed to renovate her unit. The bikers volunteered to do the labor. Free. Rachel blinked repeatedly. Why? The question genuinely confused them. Tommy finally answered. Because somebody helped us once. The simplicity of the answer silenced everyone. 2 days later, nearly 20 bikers showed up. Painting, repairing drywall, replacing damaged furniture, installing new locks, fixing problems Rachel couldn't afford to address herself. By evening, the apartment looked completely different. Safer, brighter, new, hopeful. Rachel walked through the rooms quietly, unable to speak, unable to fully process what she was seeing. Then she found something waiting on the kitchen table. An envelope. No name. No explanation. Inside sat a handwritten note. You survived. That's enough. Start living again. Rachel stared at the words, then started crying. Not because she was sad. Because for the first time in years, she believed the message might actually be true. The newspaper article appeared on a Tuesday morning. Sarah nearly spilled her coffee when she saw it. The headline stretched across half the front page. Local nurse's act of kindness returns after 13 years. A photograph sat beneath it. Sarah, Rachel, Emma, Ryder, the bikers, all smiling, all uncomfortable with the attention. The article spread faster than anyone expected. Television stations picked it up. Radio stations discussed it. Social media exploded. People loved the story, not because it involved bikers, because it involved something rare. Kindness without expectation. Sarah hated every second of it. She wasn't interested in publicity. Never had been. But the story refused to disappear. Patients recognized her. Strangers approached her. Co-workers printed copies of the article. Even hospital administrators wanted interviews. The attention felt overwhelming. One afternoon, a young nurse stopped her in the hallway. The woman looked nervous, almost embarrassed. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah nodded. The nurse hesitated, then spoke. "When you stopped to help that biker 13 years ago." "Yes." "Were you scared?" Sarah smiled. "Terrified." The answer surprised her. "Really?" "Absolutely." The younger nurse frowned. "Then why did you stop?" Sarah thought about it, then shrugged. "Because somebody needed help." The nurse stood quietly, processing the answer. Sarah could practically see the realization happening. Sometimes courage wasn't the absence of fear. Sometimes courage was simply deciding someone else mattered more. Meanwhile, Ryder faced a different problem. His chapter had become unexpectedly famous. Reporters kept calling. Documentary producers kept reaching out. Everyone wanted interviews. Everyone wanted stories. Everyone wanted attention. The biker hated attention. One evening, he sat outside the clubhouse watching the sunset. Connor's old photograph rested beside him. The picture showed his brother smiling beside a motorcycle 20 years earlier. Young, confident, alive. Ryder looked at it for a long time, then laughed softly. "You would have loved this mess." The wind carried the words away, but somehow he felt better afterward. Because none of this would have happened without Connor. None of it. That night, Ryder received a phone call. The caller surprised him. Sheriff Matthews. The sheriff rarely called unless something mattered. "Got good news." Ryder leaned back. "Let's hear it." The district attorney accepted everything. The biker immediately understood. "David. The case. The charges. All of it. Good. Very good." The sheriff paused. "He's going away for a long time." Ryder stared toward the dark horizon. For months, Rachel lived under a shadow. For years, really. Now the shadow was finally gone. Not hidden. Not postponed. Gone. And that mattered. More than most people realized. Winter arrived quietly. The first snow surprised everyone. Especially Emma. The little girl considered snow the greatest invention in human history. She spent an entire afternoon trying to convince bikers to build snowmen. Shockingly, most of them agreed. The resulting snowman looked terrifying. Massive, broad-shouldered, wearing a leather vest. Someone even added sunglasses. Emma declared it perfect. Sarah declared it ridiculous. The bikers declared victory. Life slowly settled into a rhythm. Rachel returned to work. Therapy helped. Time helped. Support helped. Healing wasn't fast, but it was happening, and that was enough. Then Christmas arrived. The sisters planned a quiet celebration. Dinner, presents, family, nothing complicated. Then 20 motorcycles appeared outside. Sarah looked through the window and immediately started laughing. Rachel laughed too, because of course they did. Of course the bikers showed up. The evening became something special, not because of gifts, not because of food, because everyone belonged. Somehow, against all odds, this strange collection of nurses, bikers, survivors, and friends had become a family. Not by blood, by choice. The strongest kind. Later that night, Emma handed Ryder a small box. The biker looked suspicious. "What is it?" "A present." The answer didn't help. Slowly he opened it. Inside sat a handmade keychain. Simple, small, a tiny motorcycle attached to a silver heart. The old biker stared at it, silent, then looked at Emma. "You made this?" She nodded proudly. The biker cleared his throat. Twice. Because his eyes suddenly felt suspiciously wet. "No crying." Jake immediately pointed. "He's crying." "I am not." "You absolutely are." The entire room burst into laughter, including Ryder. Eventually, spring returned. Flowers bloomed. The world felt lighter, brighter, healthier. Almost exactly 1 year after Rachel's rescue, the town organized a community celebration. Nobody expected a large turnout. Hundreds of people arrived. The event took place in the town park. Families filled picnic tables. Children played games. Veterans gathered beneath shaded tents. Motorcycles lined walking paths. The atmosphere felt joyful, the kind of day people remembered years later. Sarah stood near the stage holding Emma's hand. Rachel stood beside her. Healthy, confident, free. The transformation felt remarkable, not because she became someone new, because she finally became herself again. The mayor stepped to the microphone. A short speech followed. Then another. Then something unexpected happened. The mayor called Sarah forward. She immediately shook her head. No. Too late. The crowd was already applauding. Reluctantly, she walked to the stage. The mayor smiled. This town wanted to thank someone. Sarah sighed. The crowd laughed. The mayor continued. 13 years ago, she stopped to help a stranger. The park became quiet. Last year, that kindness came back when her family needed it most. Sarah looked toward Ryder. The biker looked equally uncomfortable. Good. She wasn't suffering alone. The mayor presented a plaque. Simple, elegant, meaningful. The inscription read, "One act of kindness can change a life." Sarah stared at the words, then at Rachel, then at Emma, then at the bikers. The truth hit her all over again. One act of kindness, one roadside stop, one decision. That was all it took. As the sun began setting, motorcycles started leaving the park. Families packed belongings. Children chased the final moments of daylight. The celebration slowly ended, but the feeling remained. Ryder walked Sarah to her car, the same way he always did. Neither spoke for a while. Then Sarah smiled. You know, I almost drove past that accident. The biker looked surprised. What? 13 years ago. She laughed softly. I was tired, late for work, running behind. Ryder stared at her. Really? She nodded. Almost kept driving. The biker looked toward the sunset, then back at Sarah. Good thing you didn't. For several seconds, neither said anything, because there wasn't anything left to say. Some stories ended with dramatic victories. Some ended with revenge. Some ended with justice. This story ended with something better. People, good people, finding each other, and proving that kindness never truly disappears. Sometimes it simply takes 13 years to find its way home.